Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Amores Perros, starring Gail Garcia Bernal, Emilio Echeverria, Goya Toledo, Alvaro Guerrero, Vanessa Bausch, Jorge Salinas, Marco Perez, and Rodrigo Murray, directed by Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu. Now, before I get into this series, or this movie, I'll say, welcome to Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu. Even though I have reviewed Birdman before, I'm not going to review it again, but I'll watch it in spirit. But I have seen half of his biography before. I've seen Babel, Birdman, as I already brought it up and said I just reviewed, and The Revenant. And the other stuff I have not yet seen before. So let's see how this goes because I've never seen this movie before. Let's get into it and see if it's if it's his, if it's a masterpiece. We open the movie with Octavio, played by Gael Garcia Bernal, and Luis, played by Jorge Salinas, on the run from some mobsters. And why is that? It'll be explained later in the movie. And I thought he had a dead body in the backseat, but as it turns out, it's a dog that I learned on my second viewing, or at this point in my first viewing later in the show, in the movie, I mean, that has been shot as they almost escape from the mobsters with guns, but they do catch up to them until they crash the car of a lady we'll see also later in the movie. As we start the story off with Octavio and Susanna as it begins with a dog fight. And I thought, oh God, please don't make this movie about dogs killing one another because that depresses the shit out of me. And the dog and a gangster with a dog named Jorigo brings and his dog wins the battle while Susanna, played by Vanessa Bausch, gets home and lets her dog Coffee out of the house and doesn't even go after the dog. And I'm like, oh God, the dog is gonna get killed. But luckily it doesn't. Someone, because she doesn't want to bring it back, and her husband Ramiro, played by Marco Perez, abusing his wife while Octavio despises the motherfucker. And I like this setup very much as it makes me enjoy being around these characters. Despite I don't like dogs fighting one another because it depresses the shit out of me, like I just said. We move on to a homeless man named Maru with a bunch of stray dogs picking up on a machete, and she's Jiroko and his dog attacking Coffee, and Coffee killing Jiroko's dog off as Jorge, or it was Luis, I'm sorry. Luis follows them and Coffee home saying they want to kill the dog for killing his own dog, which is his own damn fault for letting his dog attack Coffee in the first place. As he defends himself, and when they set up a date, Coffee goes inside and Octavio lays down next to Susanna and watches the TV while Maru shoots a man at a restaurant dead. And we move on to him as a family man while his daughter answers the phone, and so does her mother, or his wife, let's say. And the person hangs up twice. And we move on to Octavio talking with Susanna about how Ramiro treats her like shit and asks her to come away with him. And I like the fact that we get these three different stories, as one is about Octavio, one is will be about Valeria, which I'll get to later, and one is about Maru, whom I'll also get to later, even though sometimes he pops up here and there. And director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu does a fantastic job at telling three different stories about three different characters' point of view for 2.5 hours, as it holds my attention. Ramiro gets into an argument with Susanna while the baby is asleep, waking it up, while Octavio overhears it through the walls as his mother tells him to stay out of their marriage, as Octavio and Ramiro are brothers, I get that impression. And next day comes, and Octavio and Luis gives Coffee a bath, and we move on to Octavio telling Susanna and Ramiro, Susanna's mother, calling the house as it was a fake call. And Octavio touches Susanna rather inappropriately, as I get he wants her. And Octavio goes to a business owner named Fatso to take Coffee in for dog fighting against Joroko's dog to earn money, while Jiroko says he owes him either money or a dog, in which I didn't get quite get what the big deal was, and the cinematography is absolutely breathtaking from start to finish. Fatso accepts coffee into the dogfight while Octavio goes to the store Ramiro works at, and he wants to pay for his things, but Octavio headbutts Ramiro for giving him a hard time, and Valeria's father gets on the phone with another woman, or was it Samu? Let's move on. As he tries to get away with her, and we move on to Ramiro beating up on Octavio for headbutting him at the store and says, "Stay out of my business, asshole," to him. Now, I get Ramiro is the real asshole in this situation, but beating up on Octavio while in the fucking shower, I mean, really? As we move on to Octavio finding coffee off against Jiroko's dog as he wins some money against Jiroko, while we get a funeral in which Maru, that's his name, happens to be there with his daughter, is led to believe he's dead, must stay dead for her purposes, while his sister-in-law, is rather upset with Maru, and Octavio gives Susanna the money and he won from the dog fighting, and he hides it in her treasure chest. And he asks her to come away with him one last time, and she reluctantly agrees to it, while we get images from one dog fight after another, and the acting in this is absolutely incredible. And kudos to these actors for pulling their roles, and director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu directing them the exact right way. Ramiro threatens to pull a gun out on Coffee because he has money, Octavio does, and almost kills the poor doggy as it was not loaded, and Octavio gets a toy for Susanna and Ramiro's kid, and Octavio touches her inappropriately once again while Ramiro isn't there and kisses her in front of the kid, which isn't the smartest idea to do in front of the kid. While Maru leaves his family at nighttime and asks Fatso's men to beat up on Ramiro and beating up Octavio and Susanna while they have sexual intercourse. And I like this movie more than I thought I was going to, because this is a movie I can follow with the subtitles on from start to finish, as this was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars, as it looks great for being back in 2000. Octavio loses his money thanks to Susanna taking off with it and uses it for her, Aunt Ramiro, and their child, while they see on the TV Valeria, played by Goya Toledo, with her boyfriend, Daniel, and her dog Richie, which I'll get to later on in the review. And they figure out a way to use the money to defeat Jiroko, and but they don't have 40,000 as what they agreed to. They had 20,000 money to fight Jiroko's dog, and when it begins, Jiroko's dog was losing, so Jiroko pulls out a gun and shoots Coffee, which felt like that was cheating. And Octavio and Jorge get Coffee in the car, and Octavio grabs a knife and stabs the hell out of Jiroko for cheating, and they take off and get into a chase sequence where we saw in the opening scene until he crashes the car, and then we start the next story. And I actually like this story, as it might be my second best after seeing it a second time, as I was satisfied with it. And let's see how the next two stories go. The audience moves on to the second story, called Valeria and Daniel, and we see the same footage on the TV as the last story, with Valeria introducing Richie on the TV and gets a new apartment thanks to her agent and her boyfriend Daniel, with a view of the billboard where she's hanging out, as well as a hole on the ground, while Maru follows his daughter while Valeria drives off with Richie and gets injured to a car crash, with Octavio, and her leg is injured as she gets crippled for now, and she gets hospitalized until she gets home and sees Richie is safe and sound, and Valeria and Daniel have intercourse as well as the next day coming, and Daniel gets ready for work while Valeria stays home, and plays with Richie until Richie goes in the hole created about 10 minutes ago in the movie. And the production design and set decoration was very well done, as I was admiring the location of Mexico. And yes, this is shot in Mexico, and it's completely spoken in Spanish, but it's okay. Maru visits his daughter's work office and sees photos of her, as this movie is incredibly well made, while Valeria calls for Richie in the hole, And when Daniel gets home, Valeria tells Daniel about Richie in the hole, and he might escape as they give him food in the hole, while at nighttime, Valeria and Daniel hear Richie being tortured by some rats under the ground. And this is to the point, this may be my least favorite story in this whole movie, as I realized it on my second viewing for this review as the phone rings in the middle of the fucking night when Daniel picks up and the person hangs up while we move on to daytime, and Valeria is on the phone with Daniel as she gets out of bed and gets off the chair to get on the ground, which is not a good idea at all while you're on a cast, particularly when you're crippled. And she calls off Daniel while at work. She calls Daniel while at work, and he's led to believe his wife is calling him, in which this motherfucker must be having an affair with Valeria. And if I were her, I would just straight up hang up and leave his ass. Kind of like in Hitchcock, where Anthony Hopkins hears his wife is having an affair, even though she was just making plans with a friend, and hangs up. That could have made things more fucking awkward. Daniel and Valeria create a bigger hole for Richie to come out of while getting a call from a neighbor whom Valeria says to them, "Fuck your mother." And they can't find Richie, and Valeria worries about it. And she goes back to the doctor to get the cast off and sees an x-ray at this point, and they take it all off. And she feels lousy, like she needs to sleep. While at nighttime, she argues with Daniel because he hears Richie and he refuses to look for him. And she says to him, "Drop dead fucker," which does feel like any relationship, as she acts carelessly about whether or not Daniel comes home from work, and he calls his wife and doesn't say anything until he hangs up, and he comes back home with a bigger hole than ever. Well, while he has no choice but to bang on the door and sleeps on the couch until eventually he breaks the door down, and this is when I lose connection to Daniel at this point in time. But don't get me wrong, this is a well done movie in my opinion. Daniel sees Valeria on the ground while knocked out, and he brings her to the hospital, where back home and here's Richie and looks for the crying doggy as he's hurt, in which I get the impression that he was tortured by those damn rats. And he's saved by Daniel, Richie is, and Valeria comes back home in a powered wheelchair with Daniel and Richie, as the story feels pretty fucking depressing as we move on to the last story, The Goat and Maru, as it starts with a couple of cop partners, Leonardo and Gustavo, heading to Maru's home, as he's a private detective of some kind, and Gustavo asks Maru to get rid of a man who cheated him in life, his brother slash partner. And it did take me my second viewing to learn these characters are as for half the movie, especially with Maru, I was calling him El Chavo, who was a character in the movie, but I enjoyed myself watching 2.5 hours of this movie. But I was confused who Maru was for half the time, I will say that much. Maru does his last job and prepares himself to see his daughter again while not knowing who he is, while he walks around and sees Gustavo meeting up with someone while he sees his daughter and follows her like we saw him doing earlier in the movie. And Maru witnesses the crash between Octavio and Valeria and takes Octavio's dog Coffee away from the crime scene. And he checks on them both and says they're both fine and need an ambulance. And I really love how all this is connected at this point in the movie. Maru heals Coffee, as luckily he isn't dead, which is why this may be my favorite story of the three stories, because the audience sees Coffee didn't die on Octavio's hands after getting shot by Jiroko earlier in the film. While a couple of unorganized robbers rob a bank, as one guy comes in and stops the whole thing by killing one of the robbers and stopping the other one, and Coffee gets some food in his system as Maru leaves the home with the dogs gone alone, and which he'll regret that later in the movie. And while Leonardo visits Maru about Gustavo's case, and he tells him he is getting close while he's driving a truck of some kind and follows his daughter's boyfriend from his home to a different place at nighttime as he sees him on the street. And we see Susanna visiting Ramiro about his brother Octavio, as I was very confused as to what the fuck was going on at this point. in the scene, as that scene didn't belong in the story in particular. Maybe it does, but I could be wrong about that. Maru gets home and sees the other dogs were killed by Coffee, and he's super upset to the point he points a gun and almost kills Coffee, and realizes he can't kill the animal. And I'm going to understand this scene as it wasn't Coffee's fault because that was what he was trained to do, and Maru can't kill the animal because that was how he was taught. And Maru eventually makes Coffee his bodyguard dog after his loyal dog is dead because of Coffee himself. And he burns the other dogs to ashes, and he puts on his glasses after saying he'll see blurry from now. And as the next day comes and Maru goes to town with the glasses on, finding Gustavo, and the man Gustavo wanted killed, as he starts with the man and puts him in his home and offers him a drink, which is a hospitality thing to do. And Maru gives the man water and tortures him, excuse me. And I'm actually relating with Maru at this point in the story, as the character has an arc. The audience will learn at the end. While torturing the man, he asks him questions about the man who wants him killed, as he's his half brother and partner at a family business, like I brought up before. And next day comes and he feeds him a banana and calls Gustavo on the phone, and Gustavo comes by Maru's home and sees his half brother slash partner is being held hostage, and Maru asks Gustavo to kill him himself. And this scene was pretty fucking intense, and after the scene of intensity, Coffee watches them both until it's time to leave, and Maru shaves his beard off and gives them the option of one man killing another as he leaves and takes the Coffee with him. And he cleans himself up and leaves a message for his daughter. And this climax was a powerful climax to a powerful movie. But how powerful was this movie for a first-time director, Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 8.5 out of 10. I like the setup very much, as it makes me enjoy being around the characters despite I don't like dogfighting, as it depresses the shit out of me. And I like the fact this movie tells 3 different stories, point of views, as one is with Octavio, one is with Valeria, and one is about Maru. And director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu does a fantastic job telling 3 different stories about characters' point of views for 2.5 hours, and it holds my attention as the cinematography was breathtaking from start to finish. The acting in this is incredible, and kudos to the actors as well as the director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu for directing these actors the right way. And I like this movie more than I thought I was going to, because this is a movie I can follow with the subtitles on, as this was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars back in 2000, and it looks absolutely great. And I really like the Maru story, as that felt the most powerful of them all. While the Octavio story was second best, despite I don't like the dogfighting in general, and Valeria is my least favorite story, because the poor doggy getting tortured by rats was very unsettling for me. The production design and set decoration was well done in this movie throughout, as this movie is incredibly well made. And it's a solid recommendation for the movie, while in the second story, I was losing connection with those characters. But don't get me wrong, this is a well done movie in my opinion. While I did enjoy watching 2.5 hours of this movie, but sometimes I was just confused as it did take my second viewing to understand what was happening in the movie. But otherwise, it was a very good movie, and I recommend people, those of you that do know Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu's work from Birdman, which I reviewed, and The Revenant, which I'll talk about later in the director's filmography, to go check this out, as this is a great story to a very good director, from a very good director, as this was a powerful movie from start to finish. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for Amores Perros, and next time I will be back with 21 grams. And until then, have a good day, everyone.